class, welcome back. I hope you are comfortable, relaxed, and ready to learn, because today we're going to be studying a Pokemon that is round, very small, and also very soft, and that is Azurill. Here he is. Now, Azurill is known as the Polka Dot Pokémon. The Polka Dot Pokémon. It is a normal and fairy type Pokemon. And I know what you're thinking. It looks like a water type, am I right? And that is because its evolutions are indeed water type. But little Azurill does not get that typing just yet. Now, if you're thinking, wait a minute, I thought Azurill was only a normal type, not a normal fairy. Well, we thought that too, until we discovered that it is definitely a fairy type Pokemon too. And you might be wondering, how do you discover that, Well, we had some suspicions already, but there was an incident some years ago that confirmed it, where there was basically a wild salamence. I know, very scary, a wild salamence. And it used Draco Meteor, which is a dragon type move, and it hit the Azurill. And the Azurill was fine after getting hit by that. So we had to investigate it, because we were like, there's no way that could happen, We thought, I don't know, maybe the Azurill dodged the attack, the meteor came and he's like, maybe it used Protect, so it doesn't take damage. Maybe that just happened to be the most insanely strong and powerful Azurill in the world, and it was fine. Well, after some experiments and testing, we discovered that it was definitely a fairy type as well as a normal type. And from that moment on, we started to classify Azurill and its evolutions as also being fairy type Pokemon. And we still have some people saying, oh, back in my day, Azurill was just a normal type Pokemon. Well, yes, but times change. Research now says that it is now a normal and fairy type Pokemon. We have to update it. Try using a dragon type move on your Azurill. It will not work, because obviously fairy is immune to dragon type attacks. Anyways, let's get that out of the way and look at its biology. Okay, its biology. Now, Azurill, as you can see, is blue. Very nice. And it is very round, has a big sphere here. That is like its head. And one sphere here. That is the tip of its tail. And this little thing is its tail right here. It has two little ears. One ear, two ear, one, two, two little ears. Two little feet. One foot, another foot, foot. And two little sweet white cheeks. One little sweet white cheek. And the other one is over here. You can barely see it. Now, Azurill's body, as you might guess, is extremely light. Almost like a balloon of some sort. In fact, its tail is actually used as a flotation device, so that Azurill will not sink into the water. The tail is actually also quite bouncy, and Azurills like to play with their own tails quite a lot. However, that is not all the uses that the tail has, as Azurill can also spin its tail around, and throw it. And, because they're throwing their tail, obviously their body is going to get pushed forwards as well. And they can move up to 10 meters or 33 feet in distance by throwing their tail, and then obviously their body comes along, which is insane considering that Azurill is only 20 centimeters or 8 inches tall. So they're really throwing their tail and flying 10 meters forward, which I think is insane. However, this is not how they usually move around, and neither is walking normally with their two tiny little feeties. You see, Azurills, as you can see in this photo, like to bounce on their tail to move around. As I said, their tail is very bouncy, and they use this massive, in comparison to them, massive tail to stay in balance and kind of bounce around As you can see, that's a lot of uses for this tail. And here is one more use for its tail. As you might imagine, right? It can use this tail to defend itself, obviously. Azurill is not an aggressive Pokemon. I mean, look at him. But if they need to, they can defend themselves by moving around their tail in circles, like we said, and hitting opponents with it, or maybe flinging themselves at the opponent with the spinning of the tail. Usually they would do it to get away, but if they need to, they can do that as well. And one more important use for this tail, I know this tail is everything, but there's some use for this tail, is that, okay, Azurill's tail is actually filled with nutrients needed for growth. Yeah, so it stores nutrients in its tail. Did you expect that? I think it's kind of crazy that you have this tail that you use for so many things, and on top of that, it is where you keep your nutrients. Like, you have to take really, really good care of this tail if you are in Azurill. So it's crazy to me that the part of your body that you store energy is also the one that you use to fight, to like fling yourself around, to float, to anything, you know. But yeah, that's enough about Azurill's tail for now. Let's move off to other things, okay? For example, personality. As I said, it is not an aggressive Pokemon. Look at him. He's a little bean. Now, emotionally, Azurill is very sensitive and can easily become overwhelmed, agitated, or anything like that. And honestly, same. I relate to Azurill. Anyways, Azurills prefer to live near rivers, lakes, and relaxed, calm shorelines where it can play safely and stay close to others. So, very nice and relaxed. Now we have to move on to some slightly strange things about Azurill that have to do with like Pokedex numbers and a bunch of funky things like that. Because Azurill is quite different from its evolutions in some of these things. So, firstly, its Pokedex number, okay? The Pokedex number for Azurill is 298. And its evolutions, which has two of, are numbers 183 and 184. And you might be wondering how and why. Since usually, you know, a Pokemon's evolutions will follow each other in the Pokedex, you know. Well, this is because Azurill was first discovered in the Hoenn region. However, its evolutions were discovered in the Johto region years earlier, and they were therefore registered in the Pokedex before we even knew Azurill existed, you know. So when Azurill was discovered and registered into the Pokedex, we could not change the numbers of every Pokemon so that Azurill could get its like spot, I guess. So Azurill had to be given a higher number. This actually happens a lot with baby Pokemon. Yes, of course. So Azurill is what we call a baby Pokemon. He is so baby. And basically what you need to know is that there are Pokemon that are babies, and they usually tend to be really weak, and they require a lot of friendship and love in order to be able to evolve. For example, look at Togepi and Clefairy. They are so baby. They are a baby Pokemon. Another strange thing about Azurill is that its gender ratio is 75% female. That means that if you have 4 Azurills, chances are that 3 of them are female and only 1 of them is a male. But weirdly enough, when we look at its evolutions, the gender ratio of those evolutions goes back to 50-50, which means if you have 4 Azurills, 2 of them are male, 2 of them are female, which is the most common percentage in all creatures, all Pokemon. Humans, we have that ratio as well. And speaking of evolution, how does Azurill evolve? Well, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of baby Pokemon require high friendship to evolve. So, basically, to evolve Azurill, you have to take care of it and love it a lot, which should be quite easy if you're a good person, which I'm sure you are. So, let's look at its first evolution, right? Now when Azurill has grown close enough to its trainer, it will evolve into Marill. 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 So Marill is a water and fairy type Pokemon. It's no longer a normal type like Azurill. It is now a water, and it maintains its fairy type, so water fairy. And it is now known as the Aqua Mouse Pokemon because it is an aquatic Pokemon and it looks a bit like a mouse. Nice and easy. By the way, if you ever thought that its name was Peekaboo, you're either really old and not up to date at all, or I don't know. You see, Peekaboo was the unofficial name given to Marill when it was first discovered, but it was quickly changed to Marill. But some really old documents still mention Peekaboo sometimes, so if you ever encounter the name Peekaboo, just know that it refers to Marill and not some special blue Pikachu. It's not a shiny, it's not a blue Pikachu, it's referring to Marill. You won't encounter it much, but as I said, some old documents do mention it sometimes. Now, as you can see, right, Marill gets a little bit bigger and maintains its round shape, just like Azurill right here. And however, a lot of the features stay quite similar. As I said, the little ears stay the same with Marill. The little feet are the same with Marill, but it now has grown hands. What a legend. I'm so proud of you, Marill. Pick up you. Go get your hands. So, in general, its body is bigger, and it allows it to be able to walk normally as well. Normally, I mean, without having to bounce on its tail, walking on 2 feet, basically. However, they are still able to float on water very easily, and they are very good swimmers. As, you would expect a water-type Pokemon to be a good swimmer, so they are a good swimmer as well. Marills are very cheerful and energetic, and they're often found splashing happily or playing along riverbanks or calm shorelines, just as Azurill. Now, another fun fact is that Marill's fur repels water. What does that mean? So, that basically means that Marill is in the water, it's swimming and all that stuff, and as soon as it gets out of the water, it is dry. It's not wet. When it gets out of the water, it dries really, really quickly, it's kind of handy. I gotta admit, it's kind of handy. So, that's everything about the little Peekaboo over here, little Marill over here. Lastly, we need to see, what happens when it evolves, right? It evolves by gaining enough experience, like Pokemon tend to do. No need for friendship, but please love your Marill anyways. And do you know what it evolves into? No, take a guess. You can guess it. So, we have Azurill, we have Marill, right? We put them together, and boom, you get Azumarill. If that isn't a mix of both names, I don't know what is. Now, Azumarill is the final stage of the evolution line, right? It is still a water and fairy type Pokemon. However, Marill was the Aqua Mouse Pokemon, and Azumarill is the Aqua Rabbit Pokemon. Bit of a random update to the name, but that's how it is. Now Azumarill gets even larger, and its ears become more rabbit-like, hence the name Aqua Rabbit. And it now has a bunch of white spots on its body, and the lower half of its body is now white as well. Azumarill is calm, dependable, and very protective. It often, watches over small Pokemon near the water, as last evolutions tend to do. They're kind of like the carrying, protective figure of the smaller, weaker Pokemon. Despite this, soft and friendly appearance, and generally being a sort of defensive Pokemon, a Pokemon that can withstand a hit, but maybe is not a strong attacker. Azumarill can actually pack a good punch as well. And the reason for that has to do with one of its abilities. And with that being said, I think that's a good time to transition and look at Azurill, Marill, and Azumarill's abilities. Okay, so they actually get 3 abilities, and I would argue that all 3 are quite useful. I said we start with the one that I mentioned just now, and it is the reason why Azumarill can pack such a strong punch, and that ability is called Huge Power. Huge Power. If that doesn't sound intimidating, come on, Huge Power. Now this actually used to be Azumarill's, Marill's, and Azurill's signature ability, meaning that only they had it. There was no other Pokemon that learned the ability Huge Power. But over time, more Pokemon have developed this ability too. But it was basically Azurill, Marill, and Azumarill's first. So what Huge Power does is it basically doubles a Pokemon's attack stat. That is insane. I know it sounds crazy, because it is. Azumarill, it's not that much of an attacking Pokemon, but with Huge Power, doubling its attack, it is definitely a force to be reckoned with. Now, the second ability that it has is called Thick Fat. Thick Fat, Thick Fat. What basically this ability does is it halves the damage received from fire and ice type moves. And I know that, those moves don't do too much to Azumarill because it already resists both of those types. But with Thick Fat, attack from those moves will do nothing at all considering it's already resisted, and then it does half damage. So it's not going to take basically any damage from ice and fire type moves. And the last ability that it gets is actually its hidden ability, and it is called Sap Sipper. Sap Sipper, Sap Sipper. So it sips on sap. Now, you might be thinking, if you're going against Azumarill, oh, Azumarill is a water type Pokemon, which means that it is weak to grass type attacks. Well, with Sap Sipper, Azumarill takes no damage from grass type attacks, and if you hit it with a grass type move, it will get an attack boost. Pretty scary. So as I said, 3 pretty useful abilities. As you can see, they can surprise you if you don't know which one it has. Do you want to risk using a grass type move on an Azumarill if you don't know whether, it might just take your attack and get stronger, If it has Sap Sipper, do you want to risk wasting a turn using a grass type move to make the enemy stronger? Probably not, right? But what if you're like, okay, maybe it has Sap Sipper, let's not use a grass type move, but it actually has Huge Power, and you're scared of using the move that would do a lot of damage to it, because you're like, what if it just zips it up? But it actually has Huge Power, and it's hitting you for stronger attacks than it should be able to. You gotta decide. Now, let's look at some of the moves that it can use. It learns, as a bunch of water type Pokemon do, it learns all your classic water type moves, such as Water Gun, Bubble Beam, and at higher levels even Hydro Pump. But interestingly, it only naturally learns 2 fairy type moves, which is strange considering it is a fairy type Pokemon. Those moves are Charm and Play Rough, and Charm doesn't even do damage, so it only learns naturally 1 damaging fairy type move. At least it's a pretty strong one, being Play Rough. And it also learns your classic normal type moves, such as, Tail Whip, Tackle, Defense Curl, and on and on and on. But interestingly, it also learns a Rock type move, a Flying type move, and a Fighting type move. Can you guess any of them? Any of the 3 moves? So, the Rock type move it learns is Roll Out, Roll Out, Roll Out, Roll Out, which makes sense considering how round it is, And then for the Flying type move, you might have been able to guess it as well. It learns Bounce, so it can bounce, presumably on its tail, and when it's on its higher evolutions, it can bounce as well. And for Fighting type move, do you know what Fighting type move it learns? Superpower. Superpower. What? Yes, Superpower, which is a very, very strong move. And somehow, the strongest Azumarills can actually learn Superpower, which is crazy. Now, as always, to finish off, we're going to look at some of the TMs that it can learn, because Azumarill can learn these moves naturally, but through TMs it can learn a bunch more moves. And as always, I think we're going to do one move per type of move that it can learn. So one move for a dark type move it can learn, one move for fairy, and on and on and on. Okay, so here we go. It can learn knockoff for dark type moves, draining kiss for fairy, break for fighting, grass knot for grass, believe it or not it's grass, mud shot for ground, body slam for normal, light screen for psychic, water pulse for water, and blizzard for ice. What a shocker, right? It learns blizzard. And if you pay attention to my last lessons, you will know that not many Pokemon learn the move blizzard. And if you cannot tell, that was sarcasm, because there is a ridiculous amount of Pokemon that can learn the move blizzard, which makes no sense whatsoever. For example, Phoebus can learn blizzard. Yeah, the silly little fish can learn it. And for some reason, Tauros can learn blizzard as well. Like what? It's a bull. Where is it getting ice from? But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, Pokemon are truly fascinating creatures, right? But as you can see, Azumarill learns a variety of different moves. Its move pool is not as broad as other Pokemon that we've looked at, but it is a respectable amount of moves and types of moves. So, that's everything for today's class. Remember, as a takeaway, that appearances can be misleading. Even the smallest and cutest looking creatures can be dangerous if you are not nice to them. They are not aggressive Pokemon, but if you're not nice to them, they will defend themselves, and with huge power, who knows what could happen. So, make sure to treat everyone nicely. I'm sure you do, but treat everyone nicely. It's nice and easy. Just be nice. That's the takeaway for today. Be nice. Go out there and be nice to someone. Whether it's saying please and thank you or doing something bigger, go do something nice. Okay? Anyways, good work today, class, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care and goodbye. Bye 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 bye. Hey, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I just wanted to say really quickly that we have now activated memberships on the channel. So if you want to become a member and support my ASMR content monthly, you can. But please, no pressure at all, okay? The content will remain the same regardless. Do let me know if you have any ideas what I could do for the people that they do want to support. Alternatively, I also have a coffee account, and I will leave a link to that in a comment. So if you want to support me there, you can as well. Anyways, I don't want to drag this on. So thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and I'll hopefully see you soon in another video. Have a good day, have a good night, whatever time you're watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye bye.